What do you mean Emily will own the company? My voice was steady, but my hands clenched under the table. The elegant chandelier above the dining room cast a warm glow over the table, but the air in the room had turned ice cold. My father, Richard Caldwell, the man whose company I had saved from ruin, barely glanced up from his plate as he continued cutting into his steak. Lauren, let's be realistic. He sighed, like he was explaining something simple to a child. You're great at technical things, but leadership? That's not your strength. We need someone with presence, someone who commands respect. Your sister is the best choice. Emily, sitting across from me in her designer dress, sipped her wine with a small, knowing smile. She hadn't lifted a single finger to help when Caldwell Enterprises was drowning in debt. But now, with the company turning record-breaking profits, she was being handed everything. I developed the software that saved this company. My voice was sharper now, cutting through the clinking of silverware. Without it, you wouldn't even have a company to pass down. Dad chuckled, as if my words were amusing. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and tossed a crumpled bill onto the table. For your effort. I stared at the $50 bill lying between my plate and my untouched wine glass. $50. For the years I had spent working late nights, writing code until my eyes burned. For the countless sleepless weeks I'd spent analyzing financial losses, designing a system that would not only pull us out of bankruptcy but launch us to the top of the industry. $50 for the innovation that had turned Caldwell Enterprises from a dying relic into a $300 million powerhouse. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her seat, casting a glance at me, but she said nothing. No one did. I looked at my father, the man I had idolized growing up, the man I had worked my entire life to make proud. And in that moment, I realized something. It was never about merit. It was never about effort, or success, or even loyalty. It was about control. I see. My voice came out quieter than I expected. I picked up the $50 bill, turned it over in my fingers, and then calmly folded it into my napkin. Then I stood. Lauren, don't be dramatic. Dad scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. I smiled. I'm not being dramatic. I'm just excusing myself. Clearly, my role in this family is nothing more than a background character, so I'll remove myself from the scene. Emily let out a soft chuckle, barely hiding her amusement. Lauren, Mom started, but I was already walking out of the dining room, my heels clicking against the marble floor. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell or demand fairness. I simply left. The next morning, I arrived at work early, as always. The office had changed over the past year. Just a year ago, the atmosphere had been suffocating. Employees whispering about layoffs, department heads quitting before the company could collapse. Now, it was thriving. My software had revolutionized the logistics industry, automating processes that used to take weeks into mere minutes. We had expanded globally, securing deals with top clients. But today, something felt different. As I walked through the lobby, I noticed a few nervous glances exchanged between employees. Conversations hushed when I passed. I reached my office, only to find the door already open. Inside, my desk had been emptied. My computer was gone. The nameplate that had once read, Lauren Caldwell, CTO, was missing. Sitting in my chair, comfortably flipping through some documents, was Emily. She glanced up with a bright, artificial smile. Oh, good morning, Lauren. Didn't Dad tell you? I'll be moving into this office. You'll be reporting to me now. I felt my stomach drop, but my expression didn't waver. What's my position? My voice was steady. Emily tilted her head as if considering. Then she shrugged. We'll figure something out. Maybe something in IT support? IT support. In my own company. In the company I had saved. She smirked. Dad suggested you take some time off, actually. Relax. Maybe work on some hobby projects. But don't worry, you'll still be part of the company. In some capacity. I took a slow breath, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. They wanted me out. after everything I had done. After every sacrifice, every late night, every solution I had created to keep this company alive. They were discarding me like an afterthought, like I was worth $50. I stared at my sister, then at the company logo on the glass walls outside my office. Caldwell Enterprises, a name that once meant family, loyalty, and legacy. Now it only meant betrayal. But I didn't argue. I didn't protest. I simply nodded. Understood. Then I turned and walked out. They thought they had won. They thought I would disappear quietly. They had no idea what was coming next. I walked out of the office with my head high, my pulse steady. They thought they had buried me. They thought I would disappear, accept whatever scraps they tossed my way, maybe even beg to stay. But as I stepped into the elevator and the doors slid shut, a single thought burned in my mind. Watch me. The first thing I did was vanish. Not literally. I still showed up to work the next morning, still sat at the tiny desk they had assigned me in the farthest corner of the building, surrounded by interns who didn't yet realize who I was. But I didn't fight back. I didn't argue. I watched. And in less than a week, I saw exactly what was happening. Emily was in way over her head. She had no idea how to run a company, let alone one that had just scaled into a multi-million-dollar empire. She spent her days in endless meetings, making decisions based on instinct instead of actual data. She dismissed department heads who tried to advise her, replacing them with her friends, people whose only qualification was knowing which wine paired best with which cheese. The company wasn't just vulnerable, it was on the brink of collapse again, and I had built everything they were now destroying. That's when I made my decision. If they didn't want me at Caldwell Enterprises, I would build something bigger. Late one evening, long after most employees had gone home, I sat in a coffee shop across from three of the smartest, most capable people I had ever worked with. Jake, our former CFO. The man who had balanced the books when the company was drowning in red, who knew every financial loophole like the back of his hand. Maya, the best data analyst in the business. She had practically built our customer profiling system from scratch. David, our lead engineer. The only person who knew my software as well as I did, because we had coded most of it together at 3 a.m., running on caffeine and pure desperation. All three had quietly resigned within the past month. They weren't idiots. They had seen the writing on the wall. Lauren, Jake leaned forward, his expression serious. What's the play here? I looked at them, then pulled out a folder. Inside was everything I had been working on in secret. We're building something new, I said simply. I didn't need to convince them. They were in. There was one thing Emily and my father had overlooked. The software. Yes, it was under Caldwell Enterprises' name. Yes, they technically owned the rights to it, but I had written the original code long before I ever implemented it into the company. In the newest version, the one with the most advanced features, I had never uploaded it to their servers. It was still mine. I spent the next month working in silence, refining it, improving it, making it stronger, faster. Then I pitched it. Not to Caldwell Enterprises, to their competitors. Within 3 weeks, I had 3 offers. By the end of the month, I had a deal, a $50 million contract. And just like that, I wasn't just competing with Caldwell Enterprises. I was about to destroy them. The first sign of trouble for my father's company came quietly. A client that had been loyal to Caldwell Enterprises for over a decade suddenly pulled their contract. Then another. And another. Emily panicked. She started demanding answers, firing people at random, blaming everyone but herself. But the truth was simple. The industry had moved on. The next generation of software, the one I had perfected, was now running their competitors' systems. Caldwell Enterprises was suddenly outdated, and I was just getting started. The moment came 6 months later. I sat at a luxury hotel ballroom, sipping champagne as the keynote speaker wrapped up their presentation. This was the Tech Innovators Gala, one of the biggest industry events of the year. Every major CEO, investor, and executive was here. And this year, I was the guest of honor. As my name was announced, I stood and walked onto the stage, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Tonight, we recognize the visionaries pushing the industry forward, the host said. Lauren Caldwell, the creator of the most groundbreaking logistics software in the market today, has transformed the way global corporations operate. Her company, Nova Systems, is now valued at over $500 million. The applause was deafening, but as I looked out into the crowd, my eyes locked onto a familiar face. My father, sitting in the back next to Emily. Their company was on the edge of bankruptcy again, and they both knew it. I smiled, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but because I had finally learned the lesson they had tried so hard to teach me. I didn't need their validation. I had won on my own terms. And this time, there was nothing they could do to stop me. It had been exactly 1 year since that humiliating dinner. 1 year since my father tossed a crumpled $50 bill onto the table and told me I wasn't good enough. 1 year since my sister smirked at me, knowing she was being handed something she had never worked for. 1 year since I walked away without a fight, only to win the war. Now, as I sat at the head of the Nova Systems conference table, reviewing our latest quarterly report, I could barely suppress a smile. Revenue, $320 million. Market share, 48% and climbing. Caldwell Enterprises? They were bleeding. I had systematically dismantled every advantage they once held. Their clients had jumped ship, their stock had plummeted, and their latest financial report, leaked to the press just a week ago, confirmed the worst. They were on the brink of collapse. And that was when the inevitable happened. At precisely 10 a.m., my assistant buzzed into my office. "Lauren, your father and sister are here to see you." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. South it had finally come to this. "Send them in." They walked in like ghosts. Emily's designer wardrobe couldn't hide the exhaustion in her eyes. My father, always so composed, always so certain of himself, looked older, defeated. They had lost, and they knew it. "Lauren," my father began, his voice carefully measured. "We need to talk." I gestured to the chairs in front of my desk. They hesitated, probably because they could tell that, for the first time in their lives, they were walking into my territory. But they sat. Emily shifted uncomfortably, her nails tapping against the armrest. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Dad sighed. "Look, we've had our differences, but at the end of the day, we're family. Caldwell Enterprises is struggling. We need your help." Ah, there it was. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm. Finally, I spoke. "And what exactly are you asking me to do?" Dad leaned forward. "We're willing to offer you a leadership role. Something meaningful. I realize now that we may have underestimated you." I tilted my head. "You realize now?" Emily finally looked up, her expression tight. "Lauren, don't be petty. We need you, okay?" I laughed, actually laughed. "You need me?" I repeated. "That's funny, because a year ago you told me I wasn't leadership material. You told me I was only good for technical things." Dad had the nerve to look frustrated. "You know how business works. Decisions were made, but now we have to move forward. If you come back, we can rebuild Caldwell Enterprises together." There it was again. Control. They didn't want me. They wanted to own me. "And what position are you offering?" I asked, feigning curiosity. Dad straightened his shoulders as if preparing to seal the deal. "You'd be second in command, right beneath Emily." I blinked. And then I laughed again, louder this time. Emily flushed. "Lauren, grow up. You built some software? Fine. But that doesn't mean you know how to run a company at our level." I stopped laughing. I leaned forward, resting my arms on the desk between us, and I made sure my voice was as cold as ice. "Emily," I said softly, "my company is worth $500 million. Yours is weeks away from bankruptcy. Explain to me again which one of us doesn't know how to run a company." Silence. Pure, satisfying silence. Dad cleared his throat. Lauren, please. It was that word that did it. Please. The same man who had dismissed me, belittled me, thrown money in my face like I was an unworthy employee instead of his daughter, was now begging. And I had never felt more at peace. No. Emily stiffened. Excuse me? I said no. I repeated. I don't need Caldwell Enterprises. You needed me and you threw me away. You made your choice. And now? You get to live with it. Dad exhaled sharply, frustration creeping into his voice. You're seriously going to let your own family fail? I didn't let anything happen, I replied smoothly. You destroyed this company the moment you put Emily in charge. Emily pushed back from her chair, standing abruptly. Her face was red now. You're just bitter, she snapped. You've always been jealous of me. I gave her a slow, amused smile. Jealous? Emily, I don't need to be jealous. I already have everything you wanted. I stood as well, smoothing down my blouse. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a real company to run. My father left in furious silence. Emily stormed out, but before she disappeared through the doors, she turned back. I hope you're happy, Lauren. I met her gaze, utterly calm. I am. She walked out without another word. And as the doors closed behind her, I sat back down, exhaled. Then I smiled, because for the first time in my life, I was finally free. The moment the doors closed behind my father and sister, I allowed myself a long, slow exhale. They thought they could walk in here, throw a few hollow apologies at me, and expect me to come running back to fix their mess. They had no idea who I had become. But as much as I enjoyed watching them squirm, I knew this wasn't over. Caldwell Enterprises was dying, and when a sinking ship goes down, it pulls everything and everyone down with it. The question was, would I let that happen? The news broke 3 days later. Caldwell Enterprises had officially declared bankruptcy. It was everywhere. Business magazines, online forums, even national headlines. Former industry giant Caldwell Enterprises collapses overnight. Poor leadership decisions sink a $300 million company. How greed and family politics killed Caldwell Enterprises. And the best part? Every article credited the company's former success to me. They all pointed out the obvious. The only reason Caldwell Enterprises had survived its first near collapse was because of the software I had built. And once I was gone, it was only a matter of time. I was in a meeting when my assistant, Claire, knocked on my office door. Lauren, you might want to see this. She handed me a printed document. I scanned it quickly, my lips curving into a small smirk as I reached the last paragraph. Caldwell Enterprises was being liquidated. Everything was up for sale. The headquarters building, the remaining assets, even the Caldwell name itself. Dad was desperate. He had over-leveraged the company, taken out loans in a desperate bid to save it, and now? The banks were seizing everything, and I could buy it. The poetic justice was almost too perfect. That evening, as I sat in my penthouse apartment overlooking the city, I thought about what I wanted. I had spent so much time proving myself, so much energy fighting against the people who had dismissed me, betrayed me, belittled me. And now? I had already won. Did I really need to crush them further? I thought back to that night, 1 year ago, when my father had tossed $50 onto the table like it was a tip for a waitress. Like I was worth nothing. And just like that, my decision became crystal clear. I made my move the next morning. I didn't go through an investment firm. I didn't use a third party. I wanted them to know exactly who was taking everything from them. So I called the bankruptcy attorney handling Caldwell's liquidation myself. I'd like to place a direct bid on all Caldwell Enterprises assets, I said, including the name. The attorney hesitated. Ms. Caldwell, do you understand what that would mean? I smiled. I understand perfectly. A week later, I was sitting in the very same boardroom my father had once ruled over like a king. Only this time, I was the one holding the crown. The paperwork was spread out before me, a sleek black and gold pen resting on top of the final contract. With a single signature, Caldwell Enterprises would belong to me. The empire my father had built, the one he refused to let me lead, was now mine. Emily and Dad sat across from me, both of them ashen-faced. Dad looked like he had aged another 10 years in the past week. Emily wouldn't even make eye contact. "I still can't believe you're doing this," she muttered. I raised an eyebrow. "Doing what? Buying a failed company? Acquiring a name that no longer holds any value?" She scowled. "You know what I mean." I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers against the polished wood of the table. "Funny," I mused. "A year ago, you didn't think I was capable of running a company, but now you're acting like I have too much power." Dad exhaled sharply. "Lauren, just sign the damn papers." I picked up the pen, paused, and then I slid the documents back across the table. Dad blinked. Emily frowned. "What is this?" Dad asked. "A counteroffer," I said simply. He picked up the papers and scanned the first page. His eyes widened. "You're dissolving Caldwell Enterprises?" Emily gasped. "You're shutting it down?" I smiled. "That's right." My father looked like he might explode. "Why would you do that?" I leaned forward, my voice calm. "Because I don't need Caldwell Enterprises. I never did. But I do want one thing." I pointed to a single clause on the last page. Dad followed my finger, and his breath caught. Emily snatched the document and read it aloud, her voice shaking. "All remaining rights to the Caldwell name, patents, and intellectual property will be absorbed by Nova Systems and permanently retired." She looked up at me furious. "You're not just buying it. You're erasing it." I met her gaze, unwavering. Yes. Caldwell Enterprises would never exist again. The name would never be rebuilt. The company would never be resurrected. It would simply disappear, just like they had tried to make me disappear. Dad clenched his jaw. "You're just doing this to get back at us." "No," I corrected. "I'm doing this because some things deserve to die." I picked up the pen again. This time, I signed. And just like that, it was over. The Caldwell era was gone. And in its place, Nova Systems soared. With no competition from my father's failed empire, we expanded rapidly, securing exclusive contracts that once belonged to Caldwell Enterprises. Their legacy had been erased. Mine had only just begun. 3 months later, I received a letter. No return address. Just a simple handwritten note inside. "Lauren, I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope one day you'll understand. Dad." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I tossed it into the fireplace. And as the flames consumed the last remnant of Caldwell Enterprises, I smiled. Because I had finally, completely, and utterly won. 3 months had passed since I erased Caldwell Enterprises from existence. 3 months since I signed that final document, ensuring the name would never rise again. 3 months since my father and sister walked out of that boardroom with nothing. And yet, for the first time since this all began, I felt peace. Nova Systems was thriving. With no competition from Caldwell Enterprises, we had expanded aggressively, securing every major client that had once been my father's pride. Revenue, $500 million. Market dominance, 62%. Status, undisputed leader in the industry. But numbers weren't what satisfied me the most. What satisfied me was walking through my office every morning and seeing a company built on merit. Seeing employees who were here because of skill, not nepotism. Seeing a company that I had built without needing my family's approval. But as much as I wanted to move forward, the past had a funny way of lingering, especially when I got the invitation. It arrived in an unmarked envelope, a simple cream-colored card with elegant gold lettering. The Caldwell Family Annual Gala. I had forgotten all about it. Every year, for as long as I could remember, my parents hosted the most exclusive event in the industry. Back when they still had power. This year, my father wasn't hosting it. Someone else had taken over. Someone who bought their mansion at auction after the bankruptcy. The invitation was nothing more than a formality. No doubt whoever was running it now had no idea about the history between me and the Caldwells. It was an accident that I even received one. But instead of throwing it away, I made a decision. I was going, not to prove anything, not for revenge, but to end this story once and for all. The night of the gala, I arrived in a sleek, custom-tailored black gown, stepping out of my car with the quiet confidence of a woman who had nothing left to prove. The event was as extravagant as I remembered. Glittering chandeliers, elegant music, and a sea of wealthy elites sipping champagne like they still controlled the world. Except this time, I was the most powerful person in the room, and they all knew it. Whispers followed me as I made my way inside. Is that Lauren Caldwell? No, she runs Nova Systems now. Didn't she destroy her father's company? I ignored them. I wasn't here for them. I was here for one thing. And then I saw them. My father and sister. They weren't the center of attention anymore. They weren't surrounded by powerful executives discussing million-dollar deals. Instead, they were off to the side, a shadow of what they used to be. My father looked smaller than I remembered. His once commanding presence had faded, replaced by something I had never seen in him before. Regret. Emily, on the other hand? She still held herself high, but I could see the cracks in her mask, the way her fingers clenched around the stem of her champagne glass, the way her eyes darted toward me, then away. For the first time in our lives, I was the one with power, and they both knew it. I walked toward them, my heels clicking against the polished floor. Emily stiffened. My father turned, and for a split second, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not anger, not resentment. Just defeat. Lauren, he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. I tilted my head slightly. Dad. A long silence stretched between us. Then, he sighed. I suppose this is the part where you gloat. I smiled slightly. No, Dad. This is the part where I say goodbye. Emily blinked. What? I didn't come here to throw this in your faces, I continued. I didn't come to remind you of everything you lost. Because frankly, that's not my concern anymore. I set my drink down on a passing tray and met my father's eyes one last time. For years, I spent my life trying to earn your approval, trying to prove I was good enough. I exhaled slowly. But I don't need that anymore. I turned to Emily. And I don't hate you. I never did. I just pity you. Her face tightened. Because unlike you, I didn't need to steal power, I said. I built my own. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. For the first time, she had nothing to say. I gave them both one last look. Then I walked away. Not out of anger, not out of revenge. But because for the first time in my life, I was free. I left the gala without looking back, without the need to prove anything. Because this was never about revenge. This was about becoming who I was meant to be. And as I stepped into my car, heading back to a company, a legacy, a future that was completely my own, I smiled. Because this wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning.